Introduction: The Obsidian Standard. The binary choice. Modern comfort is a slow-acting poison, and right now you are overdosing. You have exactly two options: continue softening into a hollow shell of a human, or systematically dismantle your ease to forge an obsidian will. Choose the path of least resistance and vanish, or choose discipline and become immovable. This is not a motivational speech. It is a diagnostic, a cold assessment of your current state of decay. The world you inhabit is engineered for your entropy. It is a system designed to harvest your attention, monetize your distraction, and reward your compliance with trivial comforts. You are being pacified, and your will, the very engine of your being, is being systematically dismantled for parts. We are not here to discuss feelings. We are here to discuss physics, the physics of character, the thermodynamics of the soul. What you call yourself is not a static entity. It is a dynamic system, a system currently operating in a state of high disorder, low energy, and zero useful output. It is a system on the brink of total thermodynamic collapse into mediocrity. This audio series is the intervention. It is the architectural schematic for a complete system rebuild. We will not apply bandages. We will not offer platitudes. We will execute a full root-level reinstallation of your operating system. From the ground up, we will examine the faulty architecture of your perception. We will recalibrate the thermodynamics of your will. We will install the uncompromising protocols for action. The goal is not happiness. The goal is not success as the world defines it. The goal is structural integrity. The goal is to become a thermodynamic anomaly in a universe that demands dissipation. To become a man of such condensed purpose and ordered internal architecture that external chaos breaks against you. You will not bend, you will not shatter, you will remain. This is the Obsidian Standard. It begins with a single, irrevocable choice. The binary is before you, dissipation or forging. There is no third option. The soft world is already voting for your disappearance. Your only countervote is an act of disciplined, relentless will. Listen now. The forge is lit. The first decision is already made. You are here. Now we begin the work of becoming immovable. Chapter 1. The Architecture of Perception. The forge is lit. You are here. Now we begin not with a grand gesture, but with a silent, surgical audit. The first and most critical system to bring under your command is not your body, nor your schedule. It is the apparatus through which all reality is filtered, interpreted, and ultimately experienced. This is the architecture of perception. It is the control room of your entire existence. And until you seize its blueprints, you are not living in the world. You are living in a simulation run by chaos, habit, and the agendas of others. Perception is not a passive window. It is an active, relentless construction site. Every millisecond, raw sensory data floods your nervous system, a torrent of light, sound, chemical signals. This data is meaningless noise. Your mind, this biological machine, is tasked with assembling this chaos into a coherent model of the world. This is where the first and most profound sovereignty is either claimed or surrendered. Most men live their entire lives inside a prefabricated model, assembled from the lumber of childhood conditioning, societal narratives, and the lazy consensus of the crowd. They mistake this shaky, second-hand structure for solid ground. You must understand the mechanics. Your cognitive architecture operates on protocols, heuristics, shortcuts evolved for survival, not for truth or excellence. It seeks patterns where none exist. It confirms existing biases. It amplifies threats and discounts long-term gains. This is not a flaw to bemoan. It is a system specification to be mastered. When you feel a surge of anger at a traffic delay, that is not the world imposing anger upon you. It is your interpretive protocol labeling an event as a personal offense, triggering a cascade of biochemical reactions. The event itself is neutral. A car is stopped. Metal and rubber occupy space. The interpretation is the software you are running, and software can be rewritten. The weak man is a slave to his initial, unexamined perception. He receives a critical email, and his reality collapses into a narrative of persecution. He sees a competitor's success, and his world tints with the green of envy. He experiences a minor physical discomfort, and interprets it as a catastrophic limit. Each unexamined interpretation is a command issued to your entire being, activating stress hormones, diverting cognitive resources, dictating emotion. You are obeying a tyrant you did not appoint. The first discipline of the Obsidian will is to install a firewall between stimulus and this automatic interpretive response. This is the practice of prosocial attention in its deepest Stoic sense. It is not mindfulness for tranquility's sake. It is reconnaissance. It is the special operator's deliberate scan of the environment, distinguishing between ambient noise and legitimate threat. When a perception arises, "This is unbearable. He disrespected me. I have failed," you must halt the chain reaction. You do not argue with the feeling. You acknowledge its presence like a system alert on a dashboard. Then you subject the underlying judgment to a cold, logical debug sequence. Ask the forensic questions. What are the raw facts, stripped of all emotional verbiage? What evidence incontrovertibly supports my initial interpretation? What alternative interpretations fit the same set of facts? If this event happened to another man I respect, how would he likely perceive it? You are not seeking comfort. You are seeking structural integrity. You are stress testing the load-bearing beams of your reality. Often you will find your initial perception is built on rotten timber, an assumption, a fear, an inherited belief with no foundation in the bedrock of fact. Consider the engineer facing a sudden project failure, the automatic perception, catastrophe, personal ruin, proof of inadequacy. The debugged perception, a system has produced an undesired output. The components are the timeline, the resources, the specifications, the execution. The failure is a data point, not an indictment. It reveals a flaw in the design, a miscalculation in load, a point of friction. The event is the same, the raw data identical. But the second architecture turns the emotional collapse into a problem-solving session. It transforms dead weight into raw material. This is how you begin to forge resilience, not through gritted teeth, but through recoded circuitry. An insult becomes a diagnostic tool, revealing either the other man's insecurity or your own lingering attachment to external validation. A financial loss becomes an audit of your risk protocols. A physical pain becomes a signal to be deciphered, not a siren of panic. You stop fighting the world as it appears. You start reverse engineering the code that generates the appearance. The world does not soften. Your perception becomes shock absorbent. Your new architecture must be built with deliberate, sparse materials. You curate your informational inputs with the severity of a security clearance. The endless scroll of curated lives, the outrage media, the gossip, the trivial. This is psychic pollution. It is low-grade radiation that weakens the structural integrity of your focus. You must become a perceptual ascetic. You grant access only to signals that serve the mission, knowledge that strengthens, examples that fortify, art that elevates, and the unvarnished data required for your decisions. All else is noise, and noise over time becomes distortion. The final, most advanced stage is the conscious projection of perception. You do not merely react to the world, You begin to impose your interpretive framework upon it. This is not delusion. It is the strategic application of a chosen lens. You look at a daunting challenge and consciously select the interpretation. This is the resistance that will forge new strength. You look at a barren period of work and label it. This is the necessary consolidation phase. You look at a personal loss and frame it. This is the clearing of space for a future alignment. You are not denying reality. You are choosing the most operationally useful version of it from the infinite spectrum of possible interpretations. This is the foundation. Everything that follows, the will, the action, the equanimity, is built upon this reclaimed ground. Without this, discipline is mere suppression. With it, discipline becomes the natural output of a clarified system. You are no longer at the mercy of what happens. You are the architect of what it means. The chaos of the world still arrives. The noise still blares. But now you stand inside a structure of your own deliberate design. The walls are not meant to keep the world out. They are meant to give you a silent, solid place from which to observe it, analyze it, and ultimately command your response. The forge is lit, and the first metal to be tempered is the very lens through which you see the flame. Chapter 2. The Thermodynamics of Will. The forge is lit, and the first metal to be tempered is the very lens through which you see the flame. Now, the furnace must be fed, not with random fuel, but with a controlled, sustained burn. This is the transition from architecture to energy, from the static blueprint of perception to the dynamic physics of sustained effort. You have built the silent command center. Now you must power it against a world engineered for your shutdown. This is not about motivation. Motivation is a chemical spike, a transient voltage in a decaying system. What you require is a deeper law. The law of conserved energy applied to the human spirit. This is the thermodynamics of will. Consider the first law. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred or changed from one form to another. Your vital energy, your focus, your discipline, your cognitive bandwidth is a finite reservoir in any given moment. The modern ecosystem is a sophisticated array of pumps designed to siphon this energy into trivial channels. Each notification is a micro-siphon. Each algorithmically curated distraction is a pressure valve, bleeding your potential into the passive consumption of another man's agenda. You believe you are relaxing. You are not. You are transferring your most valuable asset into a system that gives you nothing of substance in return. You are performing an energy transaction with a pathological deficit. The balance sheet of your attention is perpetually in the red. Will, therefore, is not a feeling. It is a logistical operation. It is the conscious, ruthless management of energy flows within a bounded system. Yourself. The weak man believes willpower is about enduring more pain. The disciplined man understands it is about preventing leakage. Before you can apply force to an external obstacle, you must first seal every crack in your internal foundation. Where does your energy go? Audit it with forensic coldness. Does it dissipate into the ambient anxiety of unchecked news cycles? Does it crystallize into resentment over past interactions, a solid mass of wasted potential weighing down your present momentum? Does it vaporize into the diffuse fog of future worries over events you cannot possibly control? These are not emotions. They are engineering failures, a breach in your perimeter. The second law is the universal tax. Entropy. All systems tend toward disorder. Your mind, your body, your resolve, they are under constant silent siege by this fundamental force. Comfort is not neutral. Comfort is the aesthetic of entropy. It is disorder dressed in pleasant fabrics. The unmade bed, the unread book, the unexecuted plan, These are not minor oversights. They are localized victories for chaos. Your will is the anti-entropic force. Discipline is the local reversal of the universal trend. It is the temporary, costly creation of order within a field of relentless decay. To make your bed is not a trivial act of obedience. It is a declarative strike against the universe's default setting. It is a small daily defiance that says, in this domain, I impose the pattern. This is where the weak man's philosophy collapses. He seeks a life without friction. He desires a path where his energy is never taxed, where his comfort is never breached. He is asking for a suspension of physics, a fire that burns without consuming fuel, a system that creates order without expending energy. It is a child's fantasy. Your growth, your strength, your very definition as a force in the world is a direct function of the energy you are willing to convert. The obstacle is not the enemy of your will. It is the necessary reactant. Without it, your will has nothing to act upon. It remains a potential, a theory. The obstacle provides the friction. That friction generates heat. That heat is the transformative element. It forges the separation between what you wish you were and what you are forced to become. Thus, every obstacle must be reframed, not as a thief of time, but as raw material for psychological reinforcement. A difficult conversation is not an interpersonal hazard. It is a load-bearing exercise for your integrity. A financial setback is not a disaster. It is a stress test for your systems and your emotional leverage. A physical challenge is not mere pain. It is a live-fire drill for your resolve. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" That is the victim's query, a plea for an exemption from the laws of reality. You begin to analyze, how does this happen for the man I am building? What tensile strength does this add? What redundancy does this failure reveal? What simplification does this loss demand? You are not a passive recipient of circumstance. You are an active foundry, and the world delivers the ore. Your will is the smelter. This requires a permanent shift in your internal accounting. Most men run a deficit model. They see a challenge and immediately calculate the cost, the time, the effort, the emotional toll. They subtract it from an imaginary balance of happiness. This model is bankrupt. You must adopt a capital model. You see the same challenge and you assess the potential investment. What asset will this build? What compound interest in skill, resilience, or clarity will this yield? The pain of the set is not a cost. It is the capital required to purchase the strength. The frustration of the failed attempt is not a loss. It is the research and development budget for eventual success. You are playing a different financial game entirely. While others protect their dwindling comfort currency, you are aggressively investing in discomfort capital. The returns are not emotional, they are structural. Sustaining this is a matter of protocol, not inspiration. You do not rely on a remembered feeling to go to the gym when it is dark and cold. You delete the decision point entirely. The decision was made when you designed the protocol. The alarm sounds, the protocol executes. You are not a protagonist wrestling with doubt. You are a system following its own most recent, most authoritative command. The you in that warm bed is not the executive. He is a temporary occupant, a passenger. The executive is the version of you that designed the system in the clear light of day, knowing this weaker version would exist. You have outsourced the moment of choice to a previous, stronger iteration. This is how you bypass the entropy of mood. You build a circuit that operates regardless of the fluctuating voltage of feeling. The lures of the modern world are not temptations of pleasure. They are engineered bypasses around your protocol. They are offers to short-circuit your own energy management system for a tiny, immediate dopamine discharge. Scrolling, binging, gossiping, complaining, these are not sins. They are leaks. They are emergency pressure releases your weaker self installs to avoid the contained productive pressure of real work. To resist them is not an act of puritanical denial. It is an act of thermodynamic integrity. You are refusing to vent steam. You are choosing to let that pressure build, to channel it into the piston of a focused action. The comfort is the release valve. Discipline is the containment vessel. The stronger the vessel, the greater the power you can generate within. Your life becomes a testament to this self-governance, not through grand, announced sacrifices, but through the silent, cumulative weight of 10,000 contained energies. It is the sum of all the urges not indulged, the distractions not entertained, the easy paths not taken. This testament is written in the density of your character. It is visible in your calm posture when others are frantic. It is audible in your measured words when others are shouting. It is tangible in your delivered results when others are still formulating excuses. You become a man who moves through the world with a different inertia. The chaos and the comfort swirl around you, but they cannot alter your trajectory. You have mass. You have direction. You are governed by internal ballistics, not external weather. Finalizing this transformation means reaching a point where your internal resolve possesses a greater magnetic pull than any external comfort or threat. Comfort ceases to be a siren song. It becomes background noise, a neutral state with no operational significance. A threat ceases to be a destabilizing force. It becomes merely data, an input regarding an external agent's intentions, to be analyzed and countered with appropriate force. Your center of gravity is now internal, immovable, and self-replenishing. You are no longer in a negotiation with the world. You are in a state of perpetual expression of your own code. The world provides the conditions. You provide the action. The will is no longer something you must find. It is the engine that is always running, converting whatever fuel, adversity, opportunity, silence into forward motion. This is the unyielding standard. It is not a peak you reach. It is a baseline you maintain. It is the constant humming output of a system that has reconciled itself to the laws of physics. Energy is conserved. Entropy is fought. Every transaction is assessed for its net gain in order. Every obstacle is processed for its structural yield. You are no longer fighting your life. You are conducting it. The furnace burns clean, and its fire is fed by the very things that were meant to extinguish it. The forge is no longer just a tool. It is your native environment, and you are both the craftsman and the alloy, perpetually tempering in the heat of a world that, for the weaker man, is only designed to consume. Chapter 3. The Calculus of Action. And this is where the world will test the integrity of your alloy. The furnace burns clean, but the world is a relentless environment of thermal shock. It will not test you with a single catastrophic blow. That would be a kindness. It will test you with 1,000 minor thermal cycles, a slow, corrosive drip of convenience, a gradual, seductive pressure to lower the operating temperature of your discipline. This is the true arena. Not the dramatic battle, but the silent war of attrition against the standard you have set. The unyielding standard is not a declaration made once. It is a verdict you deliver silently, with every minor action the world deems insignificant. Consider the physics of material failure. A titanium spar does not snap because of a single overload. It fails due to fatigue. Microscopic cracks initiate at stress concentrations, often invisible to the eye. With each cycle of load and unload, these cracks propagate. The integrity is compromised incrementally until the structure fails under a load it was designed to bear. Your psychological framework is no different. The stress concentrations are your rationalizations, your excuses, the tiny permissible deviations. I will skip the protocol just this once. This comfort is a small reward. This compromise is necessary. Each instance is a micro-fracture. Individually, they seem benign. Collectively, they are a propagation of failure through the core of your will. The modern world is engineered to induce this exact fatigue. It is a system optimized for the induction of micro-compromises. Its currency is not force, but friction reduction. It offers the path of least resistance as the path of greatest wisdom. It sells you comfort as a virtue and discipline as a kind of pathology. Your defense, therefore, cannot be a thicker armor. It must be a complete rejection of the fatigue cycle itself. You must become a material with an infinite fatigue limit, a substance where cracks do not initiate because there is no yielding at the atomic level. This is the calculus of action. It is the cold, relentless mathematics of integrity applied to the sequence of your days. Every action is a transaction. Not in the vulgar sense of commerce, but in the fundamental sense of thermodynamics and information theory. An action inputs energy and attention. It outputs a result, and more critically, a reinforcement signal to your own operational code. The calculus is simple. Does this action increase the structural order of my system, or does it increase its entropy? Does it reinforce the protocol, or does it create a precedent for its violation? There is no neutral ground. Inaction is itself an action with a calculable entropy tax. To delay a necessary protocol is to pay compound interest on disorder. The numbers are always running. You are always in deficit or in surplus. The man of comfort lives in perpetual deficit, borrowing against his future capacity with every micro-indulgence. You must operate in permanent surplus. This requires a forensic audit of your daily operations, not a vague intention, but a line-item analysis. From the moment of waking to the final conscious thought before sleep, each operation must be logged against the standard. Did the waking protocol execute without hesitation? Was the first hour of the day a net gain in focus, or was it leaked to the digital vortex? Was the scheduled physical training treated as a non-negotiable system maintenance, or was it bargained with? The data does not lie. The log reveals the truth of your character with the brutal clarity of a diagnostic report. You are not judging yourself. You are assessing system performance. The you that feels tired, that desires the shortcut, that rationalizes the lapse, that is not the core identity. That is noise in the sensor array. It is static to be filtered out by the protocol. The lures of the modern world are not evils. They are engineered efficiency traps. They are algorithms designed to hijack your dopamine pathways, to substitute the cheap reward of notification for the earned reward of accomplishment, to replace the deep, resonant satisfaction of built competence with the shallow, fleeting thrill of validated consumption. Your defense is not to hate these systems. That is an emotional expenditure with zero yield. Your defense is to understand their function with the dispassionate clarity of a cryptographer analyzing a rival's code. You see the hook, you see the line, you see the sinker, and you simply choose not to bite. The power is not in the resistance but in the irrelevance. The lure dangles in a perceptual space you no longer inhabit. Sustaining long-term mental toughness is therefore not an act of endurance. It is an act of recursive engineering. You view every obstacle, every irritation, every moment of friction, not as a threat to your peace, but as raw material for a feedback loop. The obstacle is data. Your response is the function. The resulting increase in resilience is the output. This is psychological reinforcement in its purest form. A delayed project becomes a stress test for your equanimity protocol. A personal slight becomes a live fire exercise in emotional detachment. A physical discomfort becomes a calibration point for your pain threshold. The world ceases to be a series of problems to be solved. It becomes a quarry from which you extract the grit to polish your diamond-hard resolve. This life, built on this calculus, becomes its own testament. It requires no announcement. It broadcasts its signal through a complete absence of neediness, through a palpable density of character. When you speak, it is with the weight of executed decisions, not theoretical opinions. When you move, it is with the efficiency of conserved energy, not frantic expenditure. Your presence creates a gravitational field of quiet competence that repels chaos and attracts opportunity of a higher order. You become a node of stability in a network of frenzy. This is the power of self-governance made manifest. It is not a philosophy held in the mind. It is an architecture visible in the life. To finalize this transformation is to reach a point of psychological inversion. Your internal resolve is no longer more powerful than any external comfort or threat. It has become categorically incomparable to them. They exist on different planes. The external offer of comfort is like offering a sandcastle to a man who has designed a fortress. The external threat is like a gust of wind against a mountainside. The question of power is rendered obsolete. The question is one of ontology, of fundamental nature. You have shifted your state of being. You are no longer a reactive entity buffeted by stimuli. You are a causal entity operating from a source code of discipline that generates its own immutable climate. Consider the practical scenario of the negotiated deadline. The modern workplace runs on the currency of panic and extension. A project is assigned. The lazy mind immediately calculates the minimum viable effort stretched across the maximum permissible time, padded with excuses. Your calculus is different. You receive the project parameters. You immediately segment the work into discrete protocol blocks. You assign time not based on a deadline, but based on the optimal throughput of your focused state. You finish in 1/3 the allotted time. The remaining time is not used for celebration or distraction. It is used for iterative refinement, for ancillary skill development, or for silent strategic observation. When the deadline arrives for others, you are already operating on the next tier of objectives. You are not competing with them. You are operating in a different temporal dimension, defined by your own execution speed. The comfort of praise is handled with the same protocol. The dopamine hit of external validation is a corrosive agent. It creates dependency, a need to resource your sense of worth from outside your control. Your calculus intercepts this. Praise is received as data point, a signal that a certain output has met an external standard. It is logged. It is not internalized as identity. The same process is applied to criticism. Both are stripped of their emotional payload and fed into the system as neutral feedback for adjustment. Your internal compass is gyroscopically stabilized, immune to the magnetic pull of others' opinions. Your worth is a fixed, non-negotiable line item in your own ledger, backed by the full reserve of your executed actions. This is the lived reality of the unyielding standard. It is a silent, continuous audit. A life where every minute is a conscious investment in a compound interest account of character. The comfort-driven man lives in a series of disconnected, reactive moments, each one leaching a small percentage of his potential. You live in a consolidated, purpose-built timeline, where each moment is a deliberate brick in an edifice that will long outlast the fleeting temptations that once seemed so compelling. The fire of the forge is no longer an event, it is the ambient temperature of your existence, and in that heat, you are not being tempered. You have achieved thermal equilibrium. You are the heat. Chapter 4. The Protocol of Equanimity. And from that state of thermal equilibrium, a new operational mode emerges, not the frantic forging of will, nor the vigilant calculus of action, but a silent, pervasive protocol, a background process running with such efficiency that it becomes indistinguishable from consciousness itself. This is the protocol of equanimity. It is the operating system of the forged man, installed after the fire, governing the cool, enduring machine you have become. Equanimity is not passive acceptance. It is not spiritual bypassing dressed in stoic robes. It is the active, tactical management of your internal state in the face of external volatility. Think of it as the gyroscopic stabilization system in a ship navigating a Force 10 storm. The storm is real. The waves are monstrous. The wind screams. But deep within the hull, a spinning mass maintains orientation. The ship heels, it groans, but it does not capsize. It maintains its heading. Your emotions, your primal reactions are that storm. The protocol is your gyroscope. Most men mistake the storm for the self. A surge of anger is them, a wave of anxiety defines them, a spike of lust controls them. They are passengers, seasick and terrified, in a vessel with no pilot. Your previous work dismantled that fallacy. You learned you are not the storm, you are the vessel. And now you are installing the navigation system. The protocol's first directive is sensor calibration. Your physiological reactions, the clenched jaw, the quickened pulse, the adrenal dump, are merely data streams. They are system alerts, not commands. A competitor undermines you in a meeting. The flash of heat in your chest is an alert, perceived threat to status. The protocol intercepts this. It does not suppress it. It acknowledges the signal and runs a diagnostic. Is the threat real? Does it align with your core objectives? Is the emotional payload useful for the next action? 99 times out of 100, the answer is no. The alert is legacy code, a primitive subroutine screaming about tribal hierarchies. You thank the alert. You log it, and you deallocate its processing power. This is where the weak man fails. He believes he must feel differently. He seeks a technique to not feel anger. That is a fool's errand. The sensation is electrochemical. It is physics. You cannot wish away physics. You can only engineer around it. The protocol does not change the sensation. It changes the routing. It prevents the sensation from hijacking the executive function. The anger does not flow to your fists or your tongue. It is diverted into a closed loop, where its energy is dissipated as inert thermal output, or better yet, converted into focused observational power. You feel the fire, but you use its light to see the situation more clearly, not to burn the room down. The modern world is a sustained denial of this protocol. It is a carnival designed to overload your senses. Every notification, every outrage headline, every curated highlight reel is a denial of service attack on your equanimity. It seeks to keep you in a constant state of low-grade alarm or desperate craving. It wants you reactive. A reactive man is a controllable man. He buys things to quell anxiety. He votes based on manufactured fear. He seeks validation to patch a perceived leak in his worth. He is a puppet whose strings are pulled by 1,000 chaotic hands. Your protocol is your firewall. It defines a clear perimeter between the external data sphere and your internal command center. Data is allowed in, but it is quarantined, scanned, and stripped of its emotional malware before it ever reaches your core decision-making matrix. Bad news from the market? Data packet received. Emotional valence, neutral. You analyze the numbers, adjust the model, execute the contingency. A personal slight. Data packet received. Source, insecure individual. Priority, low. You discard it. recognizing it as psychological debris with no bearing on your mission. This is not indifference. It is immense, deliberate selectivity. The second function of the protocol is load distribution. Adversity, when it comes, and it will, is not a single catastrophic weight to be borne by your momentary strength. That is how backs break and wills shatter. The protocol architectures adversity as a distributed load. It frames the event not as a unique horror, but as a specific instance of a universal class, an obstacle. You have a subroutine for obstacles. You have been running it since you mastered the thermodynamics of will. Therefore, a financial loss is not a unique tragedy. It is an obstacle of resource class. The protocol calls the resource reallocation subroutine. A betrayal is not a unique wound. It is an obstacle of alliance class. The protocol calls the trust recalibration and perimeter hardening subroutine. By categorizing and processing adversity through existing, hardened frameworks, you prevent any single event from claiming a monopoly on your psyche. You contain the psychological spill. This is the antithesis of drama. Drama is the amplification of an event until it distorts all reality, demanding total emotional capitulation. The protocol is the reduction of an event to its true, manageable size. It is the application of perspective as a cooling agent. Ask the brutal question. In the context of your decade-long vision, does this event merit a system-wide shutdown? Will this matter in 5 years? The answer almost always collapses the wave function of panic. The event returns to its proper scale, a problem to be solved, not an apocalypse to be endured. The final, most advanced layer of the protocol is the cultivation of negative capability. This is the capacity to exist in a state of uncertainty, ambiguity, or intellectual tension without immediately reaching for a resolution. The immature mind craves closure. It demands a villain, a simple cause, a satisfying narrative. It would rather have a wrong answer than no answer at all. This craving is the root of dogma, of snap judgments, of ruined relationships based on misunderstandings. Your protocol actively resists this closure. When a situation is unclear, it allocates resources to observation, not judgment. It maintains multiple competing hypotheses in parallel processing threads. It tolerates the discomfort of not knowing. This is a supreme tactical advantage. While others rush to align with a comforting story, you are gathering data. While they expend energy defending a premature conclusion, you remain fluid, adaptable, and therefore far more likely to discern the actual truth of the situation. Your equanimity in the face of ambiguity becomes a strategic vacuum, pulling in reality where others have pushed it away with their noise. Implementing this protocol is daily, silent labor. It is the moment you wake up and feel the drag of lethargy, and you do not negotiate. You execute the morning sequence. It is the moment you receive criticism, and you strip it for useful parts before discarding the emotional packaging. It is the moment of unexpected success, and you acknowledge it, file it, and prevent it from altering your operational tempo. It is a life of conscious de-escalation, of internal quietude enforced by will. This does not make you emotionless. It makes you the master of emotion's voltage. Joy becomes a deep, sustained current, not a sputtering spark. Resolve becomes a magnetic north, not a flickering compass. Even sorrow, when it comes, is given its space, its dignity, but it is not allowed to flood the entire facility. You feel it fully, on your terms, in a designated containment area of the mind. Then you integrate its lessons and return to the mission. The protocol ensures no single emotion becomes the dictator of your days. The result is a presence that is unnervingly solid. In chaos, you are the still point. In conflict, you are the clear signal. This is not an act, it is the output of a refined system. People will not understand it. They will call you cold, detached, robotic. They are wrong. You are not less alive. You are more efficient with the energy of life. You are not avoiding the human experience. You are experiencing it at a higher resolution, free from the static of hysterical reaction. You have traded the roller coaster for the summit. The view is clearer. The air is colder. And from here, you can see everything for what it truly is. Raw material. And you are the unwavering craftsman. Chapter 5. The Foundry of Adversity. From this summit, you do not simply see raw material. You see its potential tensile strength. You see the precise angle of force required to fracture it. You see the heat and pressure needed to transform its very structure. This is the final, critical phase of the operation. You are no longer just the craftsman who selects material. You are the foundry that forges it. And a foundry is not a peaceful workshop. It is a place of controlled violence. It is a system designed to invite, contain, and weaponize extreme conditions. This is the purpose you must now architect for your entire life. Not to avoid adversity, but to become its crucible. To build an existence where every obstacle, every friction, every moment of sheer pressure is recognized not as a threat to your peace, but as the essential fuel for your final tempering. You are constructing the foundry of adversity. Understand the mechanical flaw in the common man's relationship with hardship. He views it as an interruption, a system error in the software of his comfortable life. His entire psychological framework is built around avoidance and mitigation. He seeks the path of least resistance, celebrates the absence of friction, and defines a good day as one where nothing challenged him. This is the architecture of atrophy. It is the blueprint for a structure that grows weaker with time because it never encounters the forces required to trigger adaptive reinforcement. Your model must be the inverse. Your life is not a system that seeks to run smoothly. It is a system that seeks intelligent stress loads. You must engineer scenarios that apply calibrated pressure to the specific points where you require greater strength. Comfort is the absence of the load. Strength is the direct result of the load. Therefore, a life devoid of intelligent adversity is a life engineered for structural failure. Let us dismantle the first excuse. You will claim you do not seek out adversity, that it finds you, that your life is already hard enough. This is a failure of categorization and a failure of agency. You are confusing random, chaotic suffering with designed, purposeful stress. The former drains, the latter forges. The chaos of a traffic jam, a rude email, a petty argument with a stranger. This is not the adversity we speak of. This is noise. It is low-grade psychic shrapnel. It lacks the focused energy to reshape you. It only erodes. The adversity of the foundry is different. It is a chosen load. It is the decision to run when every muscle fiber screams to walk. It is the commitment to have the brutal conversation you have rehearsed, avoiding. It is the voluntary acceptance of a project that sits just beyond the edge of your proven competence. These are not random events. They are operations you authorize. You are the mission controller injecting the stress test parameters into your own life support system. The protocol is simple, relentless, and recursive. First, identification. You must develop a sensor array that scans your environment and your internal state, not for threats to your comfort, but for opportunities to apply load. That difficult client is not a problem. He is a precision weight for your patience and communication under fire. That complex skill you have postponed learning is not a distant someday goal. It is a tensile test for your cognitive plasticity. That physical plateau you have hit is not a limit. It is the exact signal that your current training load is insufficient. You must recategorize every element of your existence. Everything is either fuel, tool, or load. There is no neutral ground. Second, application. Once identified, you must engage the load with total technical focus. This is not about grim endurance. It is about form. When lifting a physical weight, perfect form under fatigue builds strength without injury. Poor form under the same weight leads to breakdown. The same is true for psychological and moral loads. Facing a financial setback with perfect form, analysis, austerity, disciplined rebuilding forges financial resilience. Facing it with panic, blame, and short-term desperation leads to moral injury. You must execute the stressor with the cold precision of a technician. Third, and most critical, is the integration phase. This is where the raw material is permanently altered. The load is removed. The difficulty passes. The common man exhales and seeks the dopamine reward of relief. He goes back to softness. This is the moment of total failure. It is the moment where the potential gain is lost. You must not seek relief. You must seek analysis. You conduct a forensic debrief on the event. What was the exact point of maximum resistance? Where did the instinct to quit manifest? What mental narrative arose? How did your physiology respond? This debrief is not emotional. It is a structural assessment. You are examining the stress fractures and compression points in your current architecture. Then you deliberately encode the lesson. You update your internal protocols. You adjust your thresholds. The event is not a memory. It is a data packet now hardwired into your operating system, increasing its tolerance for that specific type of pressure. The adversity has been metabolized. It is no longer an external event. It is now internal capital. Now, scale this principle from discrete events to the very fabric of your lifestyle. Your environment must become a perpetual foundry. Your daily routines, your social circle, your information diet, your physical space, all of it must be engineered to apply the correct type of friction. This means purging the passive comforts that anneal your edge. The endless scroll that fragments your attention is not entertainment. It is a low-temperature oven that slowly softens your focus. The relationships based solely on mutual validation are not friendships. They are insulation that prevents the heat of honest feedback. You must architect a life that is inherently, deliberately, and intelligently uncomfortable in ways that serve the mission. You choose the colder room. You choose the harder project. You seek the critic over the sycophant. You impose constraints before the world imposes them on you. You are not living a life. You are conducting a continuous series of stress tests. The goal is not to survive them. The goal is to become an entity that is defined by them. This is the ultimate expression of self-governance. It is the conscious rejection of the modern world's primary lure, the promise of effortless existence. That promise is a lie. What is offered as comfort is actually confinement. It is a padded cell for your potential. To walk out of that cell is to accept the volatility of the elements. But you go further. You do not just accept the storm. You learn to command its pressure systems to power your engines. Your resolve becomes more powerful than any external threat, because any external threat is immediately fed into the calculus of your strengthening. An insult becomes a test of emotional containment. A betrayal becomes a lesson in alliance vetting. A catastrophic loss becomes the vacuum into which a new, more resilient structure must be built. Nothing can threaten you because you have dissolved the category of threat. There are only phenomena of varying intensity and utility. Some provide heat, others provide the hammer, others provide the quenching medium. You are the process that uses them all. The man you are finalizing is a man whose foundation is not poured concrete but forged alloy. Concrete can only crack under sufficient force. An alloy, forged in the repeated fires of chosen adversity, changes its grain structure. It becomes something that was not originally present. It becomes more than the sum of its ores. This is your end state. You are not a man who is unbreakable because he avoids the hammer. You are a man who has integrated the hammer into his own substance. Your discipline is no longer a tool you apply. It is the ambient temperature of your soul. It is cold, not with absence of passion, but with the absence of wasteful combustion. Your energy is directed, contained, and explosive only by design. From the summit you looked down and saw raw material. Now you look inward and see the same. Every lingering weakness, every latent fear, every soft preference for ease. It is all ore, and the foundry is always hot. The hammer is always ready. The anvil is your will. You are both the architect and the substance being remade. The work never ends, but the material keeps getting stronger, and the world's comforts, its threats, its chaos, and its lures, they all fade into a distant murmur. The only sound that matters is the clear, resonant ring of the strike. Chapter 6. The 0 point of desire. The clear, resonant ring of the strike is not a sound of completion. It is a diagnostic ping. It is the feedback mechanism of a system under constant, self-imposed stress. The alloy is forged. The discipline is ambient. Now, the final, most subtle enemy emerges from the quiet. It is not chaos. It is not pain. It is the silent, gravitational pull of zero. The pull of comfort, of satiation, of the subtle desire for the work to be done. This is the frontier of the forged man. Not the battle against the storm, but the maintenance of integrity in the dead calm. This is the cultivation of the 0 point of desire. 0 point is not the absence of want. That is a fantasy of monks and ascetics, a state of negation that itself becomes a form of obsession. 0 point is a state of precise equilibrium. It is the calibration of your internal scales so perfectly that desire loses its coercive power. It becomes data, not a directive. A hunger pang is not a command to eat. It is a sensor reading on your fuel levels. The allure of distraction is not a siren's call. It is a weather report on your mental atmospheric pressure. When you operate from 0 point, you are not resisting temptation. You are simply observing a force vector that has no leverage against your center of mass. Your wants orbit you. You do not orbit them. Understand the physics of this. Every unexamined desire is a debt. It is a promise of future satisfaction you have made to your weaker self. The desire for praise is a debt paid in the currency of others' opinions. The desire for a respite is a debt against your future momentum, with interest compounded in regret. The modern world is a predatory lender of these desires. It offers the immediate loan of dopamine, of validation, of ease. The contract is written in the fine print of eroded will. The forged man audits his desires with the cold scrutiny of a risk analyst. He asks not, "Do I want this?" but "What is the debt obligation?" He identifies the principal, the interest, and the collateral it will claim from his focus, his time, his sovereignty. Most desires are insolvent ventures. He lets them bankrupt themselves against his indifference. This is where the architecture of perception from the first chapter becomes your structural engineering. You perceive the desire not as a monolithic need, but as a composite signal. Deconstruct it. What is the core sensor input? Fatigue, boredom, a primitive social validation script running in the background. Isolate the component. Then apply the protocol of equanimity. The feeling is not good or bad. It is a voltage. Your task is to decide the circuit it will power. The voltage of loneliness can power a desperate, seeking outreach. or it can power a deep, focused period of creation that connects you to something beyond the immediate social sphere. The voltage of frustration at an obstacle can power a tantrum, or it can power a meticulous, disassembling analysis of the problem's architecture. 0 point is the switchboard. You are the operator. Long-term mental toughness is not sustained by heroic bursts of denial. It is sustained by this microscopic, moment-to-moment recalibration. You view every obstacle, every irritation, every flicker of craving as raw material for psychological reinforcement, but not through blunt force, through precision engineering. A craving for sugar is not an enemy to be wrestled. It is a faulty sensor indicating a blood glucose management protocol that needs refinement. The raw material is the data from the craving itself. It reinforces your understanding of your own system's triggers. The irritation at a slow-moving colleague is not a justification for contempt. It is raw material for practicing the cold application of your operational protocol, delegating, circumventing, or instructing, all without the entropy of emotional leakage. Each event is a live-fire exercise in system integrity. This creates a life that is a continuous testament. A testament not to deprivation, but to elegant self-governance. Your environment ceases to be a source of lures. It becomes a curated proving ground. Your home is not a shrine to comfort, but a clean room for your focus. Your nutrition is not a pleasure ritual, but a precision fuel formulation. Your relationships are not emotional support barges, but mutual alliances of elevated standards. This testament is silent. It communicates not through pronouncements, but through the unshakable consistency of your output, the unflappable calm of your demeanor, the immense reserve capacity you clearly possess. People will not say you are disciplined. They will say you are reliable, in a way that feels almost unnatural. They will sense the absence of the frantic, seeking energy that plagues the modern man. They will detect the 0 point. The finalization of this transformation is the death of internal conflict. Your resolve is not more powerful than external threats. It simply exists on a different plane, making the threats irrelevant. A comfort cannot seduce you because your calibration point is not more pleasure but optimal function. A threat cannot intimidate you because your core valuation is not safety, but integrity under pressure. The man operating from 0 point is like a deep-sea vessel. The surface world may be racked by storms, by luring sunlight, by tempests of emotion. But at his operating depth, there is only silent, immense pressure, which his hull is specifically engineered to not only withstand, but to utilize for structural integrity. The chaos above is a distant rumor. His reality is the quiet hum of his own reactors, the steady scan of his sonar, the deliberate course plotted through the eternal dark. Consider the tangible scenario of the modern professional battlefield, the open plan office, or the endless scroll of the digital homestead. The lures are engineered to perfection. The ping of a notification is a slot machine lever. The gossip of colleagues is a low-stakes social drama offering cheap cohesion. The easy, shallow task offers the quick hit of completion. The man operating from 0 point enters this environment as a submarine enters sonar-dense waters. He is running silent. His protocols are active. The notification ping is detected, classified as non-essential system interrupt, and queued for batch processing at a designated systems check time. The gossip washes against his hull as acoustic noise. He does not pass it for meaning, for it carries no data relevant to his mission. The easy task is acknowledged, then deliberately deprioritized in favor of the deep, cognitively expensive dive that actually advances his core objective. His lunch is not an emotional event, it is a scheduled refueling. The ingredients are chosen for neurological stability and sustained energy output, not for nostalgic comfort. The conversation, if any, is intentional, a data exchange or a deliberate brief connection that resets social circuitry without draining it. He feels no pride in this. He feels no deprivation. He feels the smooth, efficient hum of a high-performance system. The afternoon lethargy, the 3 p.m. crash, does not manifest for him. Not because he is superhuman, but because he has eliminated the glycemic and attentional spikes that cause it. When the inevitable crisis erupts, a server fails, a client rages, a project derails, the entire office enters a state of limbic panic. Adrenaline floods their systems, voices rise, actions become frantic. He observes the voltage spike on his own internal sensors. He acknowledges it. Crisis protocol engaged, and then he executes. His voice lowers. His movements become more deliberate. He is not suppressing fear. He is channeling the heightened voltage into a narrower, more powerful circuit. The chaos around him becomes mere background static. His world contracts to the problem's immutable logic. He is cold, he is clear, he is solving. This is the unyielding standard made manifest. It is not a dramatic pose. It is a default state. The forged man does not fight desire. He has moved his headquarters to a place desire cannot find. His will is not a flame that must be shielded from the wind. It is the obdurate, cold fact of a physical law in his personal universe. Gravity does not try to hold you down. It simply does. His discipline does not try to sustain itself. It simply is. The ring of the hammer on the alloy is now the inherent sound of his own heartbeat. Steady, resonant, a perpetual testament to the fact that he is not a creature of the world. He is a sovereign system, operating on self-generated power, navigating by internal stars, forever calibrated to the silent, potent equilibrium of zero. The comfort-driven world will continue to broadcast its seductive signals. To him, they are not even static. They are the sound of nothing, and in that nothing he hears everything he needs. The next problem, the next dive, the next pure, clean strike. Chapter 7. The Anti-Fragile Core. From that silent, potent equilibrium, a new physics emerges. The world does not stop its assault. The seductive signals do not cease their broadcast. The friction, the entropy, the relentless pull towards comfort and compromise, these are not anomalies. They are the constant background radiation of existence. The forged man, operating from zero, no longer perceives them as threats to be vanquished. He perceives them as the necessary environmental conditions for his final, most critical phase of construction. This is not about maintaining a state. It is about engineering a system that does not merely withstand chaos, but requires it to grow stronger. This is the cultivation of the anti-fragile core. Understand this distinction with surgical precision. Resilience is the capacity of a system to return to its baseline after a shock. A rubber band snaps back. A spring compresses and releases. This is what most men aim for, to be unbroken by life's pressures. But it is a defensive, reactive posture. Anti-fragility is a property of systems that gain from disorder, volatility, and stress. They do not simply endure the hammer strike. They metabolize its kinetic energy and use it to densify their own structure. Your psychological architecture must evolve beyond resilience. It must become anti-fragile. The comfort-driven world is a system engineered for fragility. It promises safety, predictability, and the elimination of all sharp edges. It sells padded rooms and calls them paradise. To live within that system is to allow your internal structure to atrophy from disuse. Your will becomes brittle. Your discipline becomes a museum piece, preserved under glass, too delicate for the open air. The anti-fragile core is the deliberate, systematic reversal of this entropy. It is the active seeking of the hammer strike, not for masochism, but for metallurgy. The raw material for this core is every obstacle you have already learned to perceive as data. Every drain-on will you have learned to manage as logistics. Every emotional spike you have learned to process through your protocol. You have moved your headquarters to zero. Now you must build the fortress around it. And a fortress is not built with wishes. It is built with repeated, calculated impacts. View every obstacle as raw material for further psychological reinforcement. This is not a metaphor. It is an engineering specification. When a project fails, when a betrayal occurs, when the market crashes, when your body fails, these events are not interruptions to your peace. They are deliveries of high-grade alloy. Your previous work has allowed you to receive these deliveries without emotional hijacking. Now, you must activate the foundry within. The failure is not a verdict. It is a stress test report. It shows you the exact location of a microfracture in your planning, a vulnerability in your trust calculus, an overextension in your risk assessment. The betrayal is not a tragedy. It is a diagnostic scan revealing a flaw in your vetting protocol or a sentimental blind spot in your alliances. The weak man sees the obstacle and asks, "Why is this happening to me?" His energy is spent on narrative, on victimhood, on seeking comfort to soothe the blow. The man building an anti-fragile core sees the same obstacle and asks, "What structural weakness does this expose?" He then immediately engages in the reinforcement protocol. He takes the emotional energy, which for him is now merely a surge of data, and channels it directly into behavioral correction. The pain of betrayal is converted into a stricter, more rational filter for future partnerships. The sting of professional failure is alchemized into a revised strategy with tighter feedback loops and more conservative assumptions. The humiliation of a public mistake is compressed into a diamond-hard resolve to master the underlying skill until it is unconscious competence. The obstacle does not leave a scar, it leaves a weld. Each impact site becomes stronger than the surrounding material. Over time, your core is not a smooth, untouched surface. It is a topography of reinforcements, a map of every impact you have metabolized into strength. It is visibly, tangibly, unbreakably forged. This requires a life that serves as a testament to the power of self-governance over the lures of the modern world. Your existence itself becomes the evidence. It is a continuous, silent refutation of the dominant religion of comfort. Do not announce it. Embody it. Let the testament be written in your daily protocols, in your calm during others' panic, in your sustained output when others have burned out, in your ability to delay gratification across decades while others chase quarterly dopamine hits. Your life is the controlled experiment. The world offers the variable of chaos. You apply the constant of your discipline. The result, visible over a sufficient timeline, is a compound interest of strength that renders you an anomaly. You will be misunderstood. Your calm will be read as coldness. Your discipline will be seen as deprivation. Your focus will be interpreted as a lack of spontaneity. This is irrelevant noise. The testament is not for them. It is the internal ledger, the proof of concept for your own operating system. It demonstrates that the promises of the comfort world are lies. It demonstrates that happiness is not the goal, integrity of action is. And from that integrity, a profound, unshakable power is generated, finalizing the transformation into a person whose internal resolve is more powerful than any external comfort or threat is not an event. It is a threshold you cross and never return from. It is the point at which your internal gyroscope cannot be influenced by external magnets. Comfort loses its meaning as a lure. A threat loses its power as a deterrent. You are not immune to pain or pleasure. You have simply recalibrated their significance. Pleasure is a data point, a temporary fluctuation in the system, often signaling a need to check for complacency. Pain is a sharper, more urgent data point, signaling a boundary being pressed or a weakness being tested. Neither governs behavior, both inform it. Your resolve is not a mood. It is the foundational code of your being. It is the non-negotiable premise from which all your decisions are derived. The external world can offer you a kingdom or a prison cell. Your internal state, your capacity to act from principle, remains identical. This is true sovereignty. This is the anti-fragile core in its mature state. Consider the practical architecture of a day lived from this core. You do not wake up seeking motivation. You execute a morning protocol designed to stabilize your system at zero. You do not approach work seeking validation or avoiding boredom. You engage with the task as a load-bearing exercise for your focus, deliberately seeking the minor frustrations and complexities that will strain and thus strengthen your concentration muscles. A difficult interaction is not a conflict to be won or lost. It is a pressure test for your equanimity protocol. A sudden financial setback is not a crisis. It is a live fire drill for your contingency systems and your emotional detachment from material buffers. You are not waiting for life to happen to you so you can respond well. You are reverse engineering your life to ensure it delivers the specific types of stress your current development phase requires. You become the designer of your own adversity, the curator of your own chaos, always aiming the hammer at the precise point that will trigger the most beneficial densification. This is the ultimate expression of the Obsidian will. It is cold. It is hard. It is formed under immense pressure and possesses a molecular structure that scatters light. It does not sparkle. It absorbs. It does not react. It defines. Your internal resolve, this anti-fragile core, becomes the one unchangeable fact in your universe. The comfort-driven world will continue to expand, offering newer, shinier, more addictive forms of escape. To you, they are not temptations. They are exhibits in a museum of fragility. You have graduated from that school. Your diploma is written in the welds on your character, in the silent, steady rhythm of action divorced from ephemeral feeling, in the profound understanding that you are not a passenger buffeted by storms. You are the storm's architect, and you have built yourself to thrive in the very conditions that would shatter anything less. The ring of the hammer is not an external sound. It is the internal rhythm of growth. It never stops, and you would not want it to, for in that perpetual forging lies your permanent, unassailable freedom. Chapter 8. The Uncompromising Code. And so the hammer's rhythm becomes your baseline. The forge's heat, your ambient temperature. You have built the anti-fragile core. You have become the architect of your own storms. Now you must live within the structure you have engineered. Not as a temporary occupant, but as its permanent, unwavering law. This is the phase where theory is stress-tested by decades, where philosophy meets the attrition of Monday mornings, of accumulated years, of a world whose sole purpose seems to be to offer you a softer chair. This is not about peak performance. It is about the permanent installation of a code, an uncompromising protocol for existence. You are no longer building the fortress. You are writing its constitution. Consider the nature of any code: a legal code, a genetic code, a line of machine instruction. Its power lies not in its existence on parchment or in a strand of DNA, but in its execution, its unflinching, automatic application. A single exception, a single compromise in its logic, renders it unstable. It becomes a suggestion, not a law. Your internal operating system, forged in the previous chapters, now demands its final, immutable script. This is the uncompromising code. It is the set of principles so deeply embedded that to violate them would require a psychological system reboot. They are not rules you follow. They are the axioms from which your every action is derived. Sustaining mental toughness is not an act of endurance. It is an act of reframing. You have learned to see obstacles as raw material. Now you must see everything as raw material. The mundane, the repetitive, the bureaucratic sludge of life. These are not distractions from your path. They are the abrasives that polish the final finish. Long-term toughness decays when a man believes he is waiting for the real challenge to resume. He preserves his energy for some mythical future battle. This is a critical error. It creates psychological seams, points of weakness where comfort can seep in. Your code must eliminate the concept of downtime from your psychology. There is only engaged time and recovered time, and both are active states. Recovery is not collapse. It is strategic recalibration. You do not switch off your code. You switch it to a different subroutine. Sleep becomes a protocol for neural repair. Nutrition becomes a protocol for biochemical optimization. Leisure, if it exists, is a protocol for cognitive resets. A deliberate walk, a session of focused reading, a period of silent reflection. It is never an uncontrolled drift into stimulus. The moment your recovery becomes passive consumption, you have introduced a vulnerability. You have allowed the world's narrative to bypass your filters. The code must govern the input, even during rest. This is how you convert time itself into structural reinforcement. The modern world's lure is not merely temptation. It is a constant, low-grade siege on your attention sovereignty. It offers frictionless pathways, algorithms designed to hijack your dopamine circuits, social norms that celebrate convenience over competence. Your life must stand as a living counter-argument. A testament to self-governance is not built through grand, isolated declarations. It is built through 10,000 minor renunciations. It is choosing the harder right over the easier wrong when no one is watching and the cost of the compromise seems infinitesimal. This is the true battlefield, not in the crisis, but in the quiet moment where you could scroll or you could plan, could complain or you could act, could indulge a grievance or you could release it. Your life becomes the testament when your external environment is a direct mirror of your internal code. Look at your physical space. Is it ordered, efficient, and devoid of clutter? Or is it a storage unit for procrastination? Examine your financial ledger. Does it reflect delayed gratification and strategic allocation, or does it show the leakage of impulse? Audit your relationships. Do they reinforce your standards, or do they constantly negotiate for exceptions? The world will not conform to your will, but the sphere of your direct influence, your body, your property, your immediate time, must become a pristine example of your discipline. This domain is your proof of concept. It is the first chapter of your legacy, written in action, not intention. Finalizing the transformation is not an event. It is a state of perpetual arrival. The man of uncompromising code does not achieve resolve. He becomes resolve incarnate. His internal operating principle is more powerful than any external variable because it has been disconnected from the reward-punishment circuitry of the primitive brain. Comfort is not a reward. Discomfort is not a punishment. They are simply different types of data with different utility profiles. A threat is not something to fear. It is a problem set with a certain probability distribution and potential impact. This is the final cold liberation. This renders you psychologically non-negotiable. You cannot be bribed with comfort because you have metabolized discomfort into strength. You cannot be threatened with pain because you have alchemized pain into wisdom. You cannot be swayed by social approval because you have built your validation internally on the unassailable metrics of your own code. The man who needs nothing from the world cannot be manipulated by it. He can interact with it, trade with it, even enjoy aspects of it, but he cannot be compromised by it. His leverage point is within. This is the ultimate strategic advantage. Consider the engineering principle of a closed-loop system. It operates based on internal feedback, constantly self-correcting against deviations from its set point. Your code is that set point. External events are merely the disturbances the system is designed to manage. The system does not debate the disturbance. It does not lament it. It measures the error and applies a correction. Your emotional reactions, your old desires, your latent fears, these are not commanders. They are sensor data. They feed into the control system of your code, which then executes the pre-programmed response, action aligned with principle. The system's stability is its only goal. Therefore, living the code means embracing a certain kind of solitude. You will move through crowds, but you will be alone with your principles. Your decisions will often seem inscrutable to others because they are not based on the common calculus of pleasure and pain. They are based on an internal logic of integrity and growth. This is not alienation, it is sovereignty. You are not rejecting connection, you are rejecting coercion. The bonds you form will be chosen, not needed. They will be alliances between sovereign entities, not dependencies. This is the only foundation for relationships that do not drain but reinforce. The final test of the uncompromising code is time's attrition. Can it hold for a decade, for 3? When the initial fervor has cooled, when the results have been achieved and the novelty of discipline has worn off, what remains? What remains is the shape of your character. The grooves of habit cut so deep they are canyons. The code has moved from conscious effort to subconscious instinct. You no longer practice discipline, you are disciplined. The choice has been removed. This is the integration. The obsidian once forged does not strive to be hard. It simply is. It does not resist the pressure. It is defined by it. Your legacy begins the moment the code becomes automatic. Every action you take, every project you complete, every standard you uphold without fanfare becomes a silent lesson to those who are watching. And they are watching. They may not understand, but they will see the results. The unshakable calm, the relentless output, the integrity that forms a radius of trust around you. You become a node of stability in a chaotic network. Your life, as a testament, is not a loud proclamation. It is a quiet, undeniable signal broadcast through the noise of a comfort-addicted world. It says, a different way is possible, a harder, cleaner, more sovereign way. This is not a path of misery, it is a path of profound, quiet exhilaration. The exhilaration of total alignment, of knowing that your inner world and outer actions are a unified system. There is no cognitive dissonance to drain your energy, no hidden compromises to defend. The energy you once spent on internal conflict, on negotiation with your own weakness, is now available for creation, for building, for leading. The code is not a cage. It is the chassis of a high-performance vehicle. It imposes limits to provide unimaginable freedom within its domain. The freedom to act without hesitation or regret. So you move forward. The hammer's rhythm is your heartbeat. The forge's glow is your only needed light. You have written the uncompromising code into your very being. You are now a system governed by inviolable law. The world will continue to offer its comforts and its threats. You will receive them as data, process them through your protocols, and return only action. This is the final stage of the forging, the tempering, where the steel of your will is not just hardened but made resilient, where you are no longer becoming. You have arrived. You are the living standard. And from this unassailable position, you turn your gaze outward, not to conquer the world, but to build within it a legacy worthy of the furnace that created you. The silence you carry is not empty. It is full of resolve. It is the sound of the code, executing flawlessly, forever. Chapter 9. The Legacy of Discipline. Forever is a long time to execute a code, an eternity of flawless operation, in a universe that specializes in corrosion. This is the true test, not the forging in the white-hot fire of crisis, not the tempering in the cold oil of discipline, but the silent, relentless battle against the rust of time. The legacy of discipline is not a monument you build once. It is a perimeter you hold every single day against an enemy that never sleeps. That enemy is not hardship. It is comfort. It is not chaos. It is the slow, seductive drift back into the warm, forgiving waters of the average. Your code is operational. Your will is tempered. Now you must answer the only question that matters. What will this machinery build in the world? A life of quiet consumption, or a life of undeniable consequence? Consider the physics of structural integrity. A bridge does not fail because a single bolt shears. It fails because 1,000 microscopic stress fractures, ignored and unaddressed, propagate through its steel until the load becomes unbearable. Your psychological architecture is no different. The uncompromising code you have installed is your alloy. Your daily actions are the load. And the legacy you leave is the span that alloy supports across the chasm of time. Every compromise, no matter how trivial, is a microfracture. Every rationalization is a crack propagating. The man who believes his foundation is unshakable is the man already beginning to settle. Your vigilance, therefore, cannot end. It must evolve. From the active forging of self to the passive maintenance of a system, from construction to stewardship. This stewardship operates on a simple, brutal principle. Entropy always wins. Your energy will wane. Your focus will blur. The world's distractions will grow more sophisticated. To believe otherwise is to misunderstand thermodynamics. Your discipline, then, is not a reservoir of motivation to be drained. It is a heat exchanger, a system designed to take the ambient chaos of existence, the friction, the setbacks, the petty annoyances, and convert it directly into structural reinforcement. You no longer face obstacles, you harvest them. A rude email is not an insult. It is tensile stress data, testing the elasticity of your equanimity protocol. A missed opportunity is not a failure. It is a calibration point for your ambition's trajectory. A moment of fatigue is not a sign to stop. It is a signal to engage the auxiliary systems, the protocols of rest, nutrition and recovery you engineered in the Foundry. You are not resisting the world, you are metabolizing it. This metabolic state is the hallmark of the anti-fragile core. But its ultimate purpose is not mere survival. It is construction. A reactor does not exist to be stable. It exists to produce power. Your stabilized will, your filtered perception, your zero-point equilibrium, these are not ends. They are the clean, silent power source for a life of deliberate action. The legacy begins when you stop asking, "How can I endure this?" and start commanding, "What will I build with this?" The raw material is everything that happens to you. The product is the life you imprint upon reality. This is the shift from sovereign individual to sovereign architect. Let us examine the architecture of a legacy. It is not built from grand, singular gestures announced to the world. That is theater. Legacy is built from the substructure, the invisible, load-bearing routines executed in the dark when no one is watching and no applause is coming. It is the one extra repetition when your muscles scream, the 30 minutes of deep study when your brain begs for distraction, the difficult, truthful conversation you initiate when silence would be easier. These are the bricks. Each one, laid with the cold precision of your code, is unremarkable. But compounded over years, they form a fortress of character that cannot be imitated, bought, or argued away. This fortress becomes your territory, and from this territory you project order. The modern world will label this projection as austerity, as a lack of fun. It will whisper that you are missing out, that life is for enjoying. This is the most pernicious lie comfort sells. It equates joy with passivity, with consumption. The man operating from the 0 point understands a more profound truth. The deepest joy is not received. It is generated. It is the byproduct of friction overcome, of a complex problem solved, of a skill mastered, of a duty fulfilled with excellence. This joy is not a fleeting emotion. It is a steady-state output of a system operating at peak efficiency. It is the hum of the reactor, the warmth from the forge. It needs no external validation. It is the signal that your code is executing, that your energy is being converted into something tangible. This is the joy of creation, which makes the pleasure of consumption feel like a ghost. Your legacy, therefore, will inevitably create a gravitational field. It will repel the aimless and the opportunistic. They will find your standards uncomfortable, your silence unnerving, but it will attract a different caliber of individual. Those who recognize the frequency of integrity, those who are themselves builders. This is not about gathering followers. It is about recognizing allies. Your disciplined life becomes a beacon, not by shouting, but by standing unwavering in the fog. It offers no easy answers. It simply demonstrates that a different operating system is possible, that a man can be more than a stimulus response machine, that he can be a causal force. Now, transition this from theory to topography. Look at the landscape of your current life, your career, your relationships, your physical form, your mind. Identify the single area where the drift toward comfort is most insidious. It is not the area of catastrophic failure. It is the area of good enough. Perhaps it is your physical training where you've plateaued at a respectable level, or your intellectual growth where you consume information but no longer create it, or a relationship maintained on polite autopilot. This is the beachhead entropy is securing. This is where your legacy is currently leaking. The application is not a dramatic overhaul. It is a surgical recalibration. You will apply the calculus of action. Define the next incremental, unbearable standard in that domain. If you run 5 miles, the standard becomes 5 miles at a specific faster pace. If you read, the standard becomes to synthesize and write 1 page of original thought from that reading. If your relationship is on autopilot, the standard becomes 1 week of preemptive, deliberate acts of service without expectation. This is not about achievement. It is about reinstating the protocol of perpetual tension. You are deliberately reintroducing a useful load to stress the system and trigger adaptation. You are fighting rust with friction. Failure in this maintenance phase is subtle. It does not look like collapse. It looks like a slow, convincing narrative. You've earned a break. This doesn't matter as much anymore. You can handle being softer here. This is the siren song of the finished man, the man who believes the forge is cold. To heed it is to begin the process of psychological calcification. Your reflexes dull, your edge rounds off. Your code, unused, begins to gather the dust of excuse. You will not fall. You will gently settle. into a chair, into a routine, into a life of commentary rather than creation. The legacy you built will become a museum you curate, not a frontier you expand. Do not allow it. The hammer's rhythm must remain your heartbeat. Not as a frantic drum of anxiety, but as the steady metronomic proof of life. Your legacy is a verb, not a noun. It is the act of continual forging, directed outward. You take the obsidian will, tempered and cold, and you use it to cut the shape of your reality from the stone of circumstance. You build businesses that stand on integrity. You foster relationships that thrive on truth. You create art that bears the stamp of your struggle. You lead by the unspoken authority of self-conquest. In the end, the world will not remember your feelings. It will not remember your intentions. It will remember the structures you left behind, the scars you put upon the world through your action. Make those scars clean. Make them deep. Make them a testament to a force that was here, that operated by a different law, and that left everything it touched stronger, sharper, and more real than it found it. This is the legacy of discipline. It is the echo of your code in the actions of others. The perpetual motion you ignited. You are no longer just a man. You are a precedent. Live accordingly. Chapter 10. The Unyielding Standard. A precedent is a silent law. It is a gravitational force that bends the space around it, dictating the orbit of all that follows. Your legacy, as established, is not a monument, but an active pressure. Now we examine the source of that pressure, the unyielding standard. This is not a goal to be reached. It is the perpetual state of being for the man who has internalized every protocol, every calculation, every lesson of the forge. It is the default setting of a consciousness that has been deliberately, coldly rewired. The transformation is complete. The question now is one of perpetual maintenance under fire. How does the forged man not merely exist, but operate in a world engineered for his corrosion? Sustaining long-term mental toughness is a logistical operation, not a mystical endeavor. You have moved beyond viewing obstacles as challenges. They are now raw material for psychological reinforcement. This is a closed-loop system. Every external pressure, every internal friction, every moment of potential fatigue is fed back into the system as input. The output is increased structural integrity. Consider a bridge. It does not celebrate withstanding a storm. It uses the data from that storm to calculate resonant frequencies, to identify microscopic stress fractures, to adjust its tolerances for the next greater load. You are that bridge. Your consciousness is the engineering team. A criticism from a superior is not an emotional event. It is a diagnostic report on your communication protocols or tactical execution. A personal loss is not merely grief. It is a profound stress test of your equanimity protocol, revealing the true load-bearing capacity of your anti-fragile core. You metabolize the event. You strip it of its narrative poison. You extract the tensile strength it offers, and you integrate it. The obstacle becomes a literal component of your psychological armor, a thicker plate, a denser weave. There is no wasted experience. This is the antithesis of the modern psyche. The world will present you with a menu of excuses. It will offer you the seductive narrative of burnout. It will pathologize the necessary fatigue of high-output endeavor. It will whisper that rest means total systems shutdown, a return to the soft default of consumption. These are lies. They are designed to break your closed loop. Your recovery is not a vacation from your principles. It is an active phase of the protocol. Sleep is not an escape. It is mandatory systems maintenance where the day's data is compiled and structural repairs are made. Leisure is not mindless scrolling. It is the deliberate, low-load calibration of your instruments, a walk to reset perception, focused reading to sharpen the blade of the mind. You never leave the forge, you only adjust the temperature. The toughness is sustained because it is no longer an effort. It is the environment itself. The unyielding standard is the atmospheric pressure inside your world. From this operational mode, you create a life that is a standing testament. A testament to the absolute power of self-governance over the lures of the modern world. This is not about showing off. It is about radiation. Your life becomes a silent, undeniable refutation of every weak premise society holds sacred. It proves that happiness is not a product to be consumed, but a byproduct of disciplined creation. It proves that freedom is not the absence of constraint, but the presence of a self-imposed, liberating constraint. It proves that meaning is not found. It is forged in the constant, deliberate application of will to reality. Your calendar is a manifesto. Your physical condition is a philosophical argument. The calm in your eyes during crisis is a dissertation on the nature of control. You become a walking counter-argument. People will not always understand you. They will be unsettled. They will call you intense, rigid, cold. This is the natural reaction of a system based on friction and heat, encountering a surface that is polished obsidian. You do not absorb their energy. You reflect it back, unchanged. Your very existence asks a question most are terrified to answer. What if you are entirely responsible? What if comfort is the trap and adversity the only path to actualization? Your life is the evidence for the affirmative. This finalizes the transformation. You are now a person whose internal resolve possesses a greater specific gravity than any external comfort or threat. Comfort loses its meaning as a lure. It becomes merely data, a signal of stagnation, a warning that the edge is dulling. The siren song of the easy path registers as a system alert, not a temptation. It is the psychic equivalent of a bad smell. You are repelled by it on a mechanistic level. Similarly, external threats, financial loss, social ridicule, even physical danger, are downgraded in your processing queue. They are not existential crises, they are problem sets. They are equations to be balanced, logistical knots to be untied. Your equanimity protocol handles the initial emotional surge. Your calculus of action devises the solution. Your will provides the relentless execution. The threat does not shake the core. It is measured, engaged, and metabolized. The man operating at the unyielding standard does not fight fear. He has reconfigured his relationship to it so completely that fear becomes just another sensor in the array. It reports a rise in adrenaline, a heightening of senses. You thank it for the data. You use the heightened state to sharpen your focus. The fear does not command you, it fuels you. This is sovereignty in its final, absolute form. You are no longer in dialogue with the world's chaos. You have established your own jurisdiction. Within it, your code is the supreme law. Your perceptions are calibrated instruments. Your actions are precise, ballistic expressions of will. Your legacy is the continuous outward pressure of this internal order upon the entropy of everything you touch. The standard does not waver because it is no longer something you uphold. It is what you are. You are the standard. A kilogram is not trying to be a kilogram. It defines the category. You have moved from the agony of pursuit to the serenity of definition. The struggle is over. The work is not. The work is now simply the nature of your being, the constant, cool, efficient conversion of all raw experience into the substance of your character and the impact of your mission. The world's comforts will continue to evolve. They will become more immersive, more personalized, more insidiously designed to hijack your dopamine pathways. Its threats will also evolve. New forms of social and professional coercion will emerge. They are irrelevant. You have built your citadel on a foundation that predates and will outlast all of them. You have anchored yourself not in a philosophy, but in a physics. The physics of disciplined energy, of anti-fragile structures, of action over emotion. You are a thermodynamic anomaly in a universe sliding toward entropy. You are a local reversal of the decay curve. This is your final, unyielding standard, to be a point of condensation for order in a fog of chaos, to be a gravitational well for truth in a space of narratives, to be so utterly real, so dense with purpose and integrity, that the ephemeral world of sensation and opinion seems, by contrast, like a phantom, a whisper, a vapor that cannot wet your skin or cool your forge. You stand, you operate, you leave scars of order upon the chaos. This is not a victory to be celebrated, it is a state to be inhabited. Breathe its cold, clean air. This is the altitude of the forged man. The view from here is clarity itself. Now go down and build. Conclusion: the forged man. This is not an ending, it is a calibration. The final chapter closes not with a summary, but with a silent, irrevocable shift in your operating system. You are no longer the man who began this journey, passively receiving a world of chaos. You are its architect. You have mapped the architecture of your own perception, understanding its load-bearing walls and its points of failure. You have mastered the thermodynamics of will, conserving energy for what is essential, radiating purpose without waste. You now execute the calculus of action, where every variable is weighed, every integral of effort leads to a definite result. The protocol of equanimity runs in the background, a silent firewall against external turbulence. The foundry of adversity has tempered you, its heat not a punishment but a necessary phase transition. From the 0 point of desire, you act from a position of completeness, not lack. Your anti-fragile core does not merely withstand disorder, it requisitions chaos as raw material. You live by an uncompromising code, a set of core instructions that bypass debate. This discipline is not a burden, it is the legacy you build in real time, the compound interest of every right choice. And so you arrive at the unyielding standard, not a destination, but a perpetual state of alignment. The forged man is not a title you claim, it is a condition you maintain. The Obsidian standard is now internal, a flawless, dark mirror reflecting only what you have chosen to be. The world will test this, it will send its pressures, its temptations, its noise. Your response is now a foregone conclusion. You will not bend, you will not negotiate with your own principles. You will simply execute, build, and endure. The audio ends. The silence that follows is not empty, it is the space where your next decision is made. Go make it.